this place are things of profound value, space and time, for solitude, for thought, for adventure, for learning, for the mystery of the past, space and time, to renew the human spirit, to get to know yourself and the special world around you. This place, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, is pristine, ancient, rugged, and fragile. When you visit here, it is essential that you leave no trace. Even though about 200,000 people visit here each year, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is real wilderness. Before you venture into it, you must do some serious planning. Take advantage of the many resources available, such as the U.S. Forest Service website.
I believe planning makes for the most successful trip, and extensive planning. If you forget some equipment or you don't have a quality collaboration between all the people that are going and the route that you're on, you're gonna have problems on the trail.
You have to be flexible, because it doesn't always work out the way you've got it on paper. And I also think it's important too to let somebody else know where you're going and what your itinerary is.
Guys, let's make sure we have all of our equipment here to cook dinner.
What's in here?
This is all our pots and pans. This group in particular, having come up from the Twin Cities, I'm unsure of all of their camping experience, but I think most of them, of the kids in the group, haven't had a lot of experience camping up here in the woods. I think it's important that we have all of our gear, you know, especially with planning ahead and being prepared. I think it's critical that we have everything planned out ahead of time.
If you're a rookie to planning, there are outfitters all over the place adjacent to the Boundary Waters that can be very helpful in planning a trip to the Boundary Waters.
When planning, weigh the goals, expectations, skills, and limitations of those in your group. If the requirements for wilderness travel do not work for your group, consider alternatives in other non-wilderness areas of the Superior National Forest. The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, managed by the Superior National Forest and commonly called the BWCAW, is a vast area of northeastern Minnesota, 1 million acres, a huge northern forest, hundreds of miles of streams and rivers, interconnecting more than 1,000 lakes. It's all wilderness, part of our National Wilderness Preservation System, which was designated by Congress to secure for the American people of present and future generations the benefits of an enduring resource of wilderness.
We'll probably paddle till a little after lunchtime and see how we're doing for being close to a campsite, and I would guess that we'll start keeping our eyes peeled for a campsite sometime after lunch.
Sometimes we will go work extra hard to get into a place that's more remote, but you definitely have to work to find those places.
Vast settings of remarkable beauty, but also its share of mosquitoes, black flies, and no-see-ums, wind and rain when you want sunshine, and storms that can challenge you.
Hey, how you doing? You just about ready to start a trip?
First, be aware that permits are required year-round for all visitors to the BWCAW. From May to September, there's a limit, a quota, on overnight permits, regardless of the method of travel, and also on day-use motor permits. Reservations are encouraged. Reserved and walk-in quota permits can be picked up at Superior National Forest Service offices and cooperating businesses. Non-quota self-issued permits can be used for non-motorized day use and can be picked up at most entry points or at a Forest Service office. You can enter the wilderness only on the date and at the point shown on your permit. Keep your permit with you at all times. The state of Minnesota requires that all watercraft, including canoes, must be licensed in Minnesota or in your home state. If you're planning on entering from or traveling to Canada, you must comply with Canadian regulations and U.S. and Canada's border crossing requirements, or life could get complicated. In the boundary waters, the words warm, dry, safe are important.
One of my models when it comes to clothing is there's no bad weather, there's just bad clothes. So you can be ready for anything, and you'll get anything when you're up here in the boundary waters, from torrential rains to hot sunny days and everything in between. And it may even be a week of rain.
When I used to come up here backpacking, if the weather wasn't right, a lot of times it would seem to ruin it for the group. But as the years have gone by and I've been able to learn to work with the elements, just be prepared for it instead of hoping for the best all the time. You're not always going to get the best. But I've had some wonderful experiences up here, even in terrible conditions.
The BWCAW is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. Its rangers enforce rules that are designed to protect both you and the wilderness. They're printed on the back of your permit. For example, to protect the natural and social environment, no more than 9 people and 4 watercraft can be together at any place in the wilderness. Not on the water, not at a portage, not at a campsite, regardless of the number of permits associated groups may have. So make sure your group is prepared to travel and camp independently.
I can't imagine coming up here and seeing garbage everywhere or seeing things that had been destroyed or damaged. I think it's really important to keep it in the state that it's in, to have an actual wilderness that you can go to, that you know it's going to be natural.
We really want to keep, the wilderness and the boundary waters to the point where when people come up to a site, they want to feel like nobody's been here in a long time, or that they've been the first people here, essentially.
The wildlife has always been here, but around it, things change. Evidence of the awesome straight-line winds of 1999 is still visible. Perhaps 1/3 of the trees in the BWCAW were knocked down. Yet the wilderness absorbs the blow.
Well, right here in our campsite, we've got this fallen tree that's a remnant of the 1999 July 4th thunderstorm that it's regenerating. There's all these small young saplings coming back, quaking aspens, moose maple, thimbleberries growing down underneath. The life is coming back, so it's amazing how the forest regenerates, and it's a dynamic place. Things are ever changing.
In such a setting, carelessness with fire can be a hazard. However, since the blowdown of 1999, there have been occasional planned burns to reduce the threat of a massive, uncontrolled wildfire that could start in the blowdown area and spread to areas outside the wilderness. Notices will be posted about these burns. The U.S. Forest Service proceeds very carefully with its managed burns.
Okay, let's put all of our gear over here by the fire grate first.
The topsoil here is very thin, a mere inch of it, 1,000 years in the making. The plants, delicate, some of them rare. Careless acts can undo decades of nature's work.
Is it a tree growing? I think it's some kind of moss.
Whether hiking, portaging, or camping, stay on durable surfaces whenever possible to avoid damaging vegetation and soils. Camp only at sites designated by a steel fire grate and a latrine. There are about 2,000 of them throughout the BWCAW. They have established tent pads, fire grates, and primitive latrines. Remember, there is no need to trench around tents. This will just cause erosion and damage to tree roots. Use the latrines. They are there to help preserve water quality. Latrines are for human waste only, not for food remains or trash. If you aren't near a latrine, dig a hole at least 150 feet from water, camp, and trails, and fill it in. While camp stoves are your best option for cooking and heating water, an evening fire can be a thing of comfort. If you decide to have one, keep it small and within the fire grate. Be sure to put it out whenever you go to sleep or leave your campsite. Never leave a campfire unattended. Drown it with water and stir the ashes until it's cold to the touch. Firewood should always be gathered well away from the campsite and out of sight of the shoreline. Use dead and downed trees and wood only. Just break it off. Look for wood that's wrist size or smaller, so that it will burn down to nothing but ash. If necessary, you can use a small handsaw, but remember, it's forbidden to cut standing or live trees. A camp stove is more practical than a campfire. It works even when the firewood is soaked with rain. Most experienced campers bring a camp stove. During times of fire restriction, that may be the only way to cook.
That looks good. So fire's a good backup, but you surely want to have a stove on hand to use. There are many situations where a stove is much more convenient, easier to use, and it's better cooking on a stove. And it's actually much less of an impact on the environment when you're using a stove.
But don't eat or store that good food in your tent. The smell of food might bring you guests you didn't invite for dinner. Black bears. While they may not be interested in you, they sure wouldn't mind getting hold of your food. So protect your food and the health of the bears and other critters. Hang your food out of their reach whenever you are away from camp or asleep. To be safe, hang it more than 10 feet off the ground, 6 feet from the trunk, and 4 feet from the nearest branch. Never give bears food, or corner them. If a bear does come a little too close for comfort, don't be afraid. Shoo it away immediately and firmly. You'll both be better off. Perhaps the best defense against them is to keep a clean campsite. Pick things up, including food scraps and eggshells. Keep your food in hard plastic containers and hang it out of reach of bears and mice and squirrels.
Eliminating glass containers and cans, tin cans and aluminum cans, and putting everything in resealable packages and ones that you can reuse, you take away all that trash that can be left on a site.
Remember, cans and bottles are not allowed, except for non-food items such as fuel, insect repellent, medicines, and toiletry articles in their original containers. Try to plan meals so you won't have leftovers.
Here's a good spot.
Wash your dishes right away, a good distance from the campsite.
Personally, when I came up here, I was just struck again by thinking about living simply and not bringing more than you need. The whole pack it in, pack it out thing really makes you think about how much you need to take somewhere and how you can live with less. And I want to try and do that if I can back in the city. I think the kids will come away with the whole experience of just being up in the wilderness, of having to do everyday life things just in a different way.
Here you go. Keep pulling it up.
Because of the big blowdown, some sites no longer have good trees for hanging packs. That's why bear-resistant containers are important. Depending on where you are in the BWCAW, you may use a motorized boat. There are places in the boundary waters specifically designated for their use, subject to horsepower limitations. Motor users should reduce speeds and wakes when meeting canoes along these routes. On rare occasions, you may see or hear motorcraft being used by the Forest Service for such things as fire management and law enforcement, and by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for fish stocking and surveys. Use of such motorized transportation in these non-motorized areas will be limited to that which is necessary for emergencies or for the safe transport and use of equipment. Portage wheels are also allowed along very specific routes, but are otherwise prohibited in the BWCAW. Otherwise, motorized equipment and mechanical transport, including anything with wheels, may not be used or in possession while in the wilderness. Wilderness travel is about discovery. You're bound to run across some interesting things, like old artifacts, pictographs, rare or cool-looking plants, rocks, or even driftwood.
Whoa, what's that?
It's an antler.
Cool, look at it.
Leave these for others to enjoy. And remember, removing or damaging historic or prehistoric artifacts is prohibited. You'll probably run across some wildlife while you're here. Give them enough space to go about their own business. If you cause them to change their behavior, you're too close. After all, this is their home, and you're their guests. When you keep your distance, you'll be able to enjoy their company even longer. Never feed wildlife. They're pretty good at finding their own meals. Plus, their natural foods are better for them anyway. Dogs can impact wildlife, and barking intrudes on the experience of others. So if you choose to bring a dog, make sure it is under control at all times. Be sure to help protect the environment by checking equipment for hitchhikers and draining water before moving from one body of water to the next. The fisheries of the BWCAW are fragile. If you decide to fish, consider catch and release techniques recommended by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. The state of Minnesota urges anglers to consider lead-free tackle. Avoid introducing or transporting non-native bait. Follow the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources fishing regulations and obtain a license. Fishing is one of the great attractions here, but don't depend on it for regular meals. They may not be biting. But if you have good luck and can't resist, then enjoy. But be sure to dispose of fish remains by traveling far from any campsite or portage, and at least 150 feet back from the water's edge, so the water is out of sight. Then you can enjoy your meal in good conscience. Though you will spend most of your time out of sight of other wilderness visitors, they are nonetheless around you. So be considerate of others. Contribute to the quiet of the place by being quiet yourself.
It's hard to explain, but it's kind of the whole overall feeling of being up here. Just with the quiet and the lakes and the trees and the different kinds of nature that you see. I just like being out here and hearing everything and smelling the fresh air. Just seeing a pristine wilderness.
Reduce traffic jams at portages by waiting on the water until other groups have vacated the landing. Keep your gear together and off to one side of the portage. Move efficiently from point to point. In the boundary waters, you are a long way from help. Have a plan for how to deal with an emergency. Don't depend on cell phones. They usually don't work here, and even if they do, it will likely take a while for help to find you. In this setting, you are responsible for your own actions and welfare, and for the safety and welfare of everyone in your group. Safe practices are important. Carry a basic first aid kit. Keep compasses and up-to-date maps handy, and know how to use them. Plan activities with your group's limitations and skills in mind. Plus, watch the weather. Wilderness travel offers great personal freedom, but also requires self-reliance and good judgment. Travel smart, travel safe. Your life could depend on it. Have life jackets for each person, and always wear them. Portages around rapids and waterfalls are there for a reason. Respect rapids. Some are very dangerous. Generally, rapids in the BWCAW are not safe to run, and they are never safe for swimming. Swim only in calm water, far from rapids and falls. Expect and dress for extreme weather. This is the North Country. canoe close to shore. That lessens the chance of being endangered by sudden changes of weather. If a storm threatens, get off the water and be sure to know what to do if lightning approaches. Water is everywhere. It is the essence of the place, and it is among the cleanest in the world. Yet it may contain microorganisms that could make you sick. Always filter, boil, or treat water before quenching your thirst. You can help maintain the water's purity by washing dishes, bathing, or shampooing at least 150 feet back from the shore. Remember, all soaps pollute, even ones labeled biodegradable. Often it is the apparently little things that make a big difference. Through them, you attest to your stewardship of the wilderness. Before you paddle away, look carefully for anything you may have left behind. Fishing line, twist ties, cigarette butts, candy wrappers. Bag up and pack out all your trash. Nothing but wood ashes should remain under your fire grate. Remember, burning trash is illegal in Minnesota. It releases dangerous chemicals that contaminate the soil, water, and air. When it's time to go, pack out all that you've packed in.
Leave no trace is essential because I don't want someone else to know that I've ever been there, and I would like to not know that somebody was there before me.
It gives us a lot, the wilderness. It displays its moods and beauties, refreshing us. We look at ourselves from a different perspective. We gain freedom and respite. Immersed in wilderness, surrounded by it, contemplating its many values, we come to understand why we must give something back and why we must leave no trace.